You gave the avoidant the ick. No, it doesn't mean you did anything wrong, but you gave them the ick. Healthy, loving, emotionally available partners can give avoidance the ick. And not just anxious partners can do this. Securely attached, emotionally available people can give avoidant attachers the ick. And this both applies to dismissive and fearful avoidance for slightly different reasons. Everything seems like it's great, it seems like it's going wonderfully, and suddenly the relationship is unwinding with this person. And a big factor is that you're likely giving this person the ick. They suddenly are losing attraction for you. You're not as desirable. So why is that? Let's get into it, starting with dismissive avoidance first. Dismissive avoidants are people that grew up in households where they received consistent childhood emotional neglect. Growing up in households where you don't talk about feelings and their own feelings were rejected, dismissed. They learned they can't express themselves. They learn their emotions aren't welcome. They learn that vulnerability isn't safe. They also personalize this neglect, growing up to have this wound of defectiveness and shame, feeling like they are unlovable. So they put these walls around their heart to protect themselves. And vulnerability, it really feels unsafe because their subconscious mind associates vulnerability with rejection and abandonment. So deep down, they want that love. They want that connection. They crave it. But when they find a healthy, emotionally available partner, it triggers them because closeness, emotional intimacy naturally builds, which gives them a ton of anxiety. But they were never shown how to process emotions as a kid, so they learned to stuff it, avoid it, not deal with it. They also generally don't look within because they're trying to avoid confronting that deep wound of defectiveness and shame. So they project the responsibility of their insecurities onto other people and other things. So things are getting close, you're showing up in a healthy way, you are being emotionally available for them, which means emotional intimacy is naturally building. It gives them anxiety, but they don't want to look within, so they project it onto you. And now it's you suddenly giving them the ick. They're suddenly losing attraction for you because you are emotionally available. Plus, there's likely other triggers. You might have expectations of them. You might want them to show up. You might want them to be consistent. They often grew up in households where there were high expectations on them for success. And they learned that they struggled to meet expectations because they couldn't meet the expectations of their parents or caretakers. So it's inevitable that they're not going to meet yours. Maybe there's some disagreements. Confrontation, disagreements are very triggering to them because they couldn't express themselves as children. So even the slightest disagreement means you're incompatible in their mind. All these factors will make them want to run away. But when you withdraw, when you are more emotionally unavailable to them, your attraction level in their mind goes up and you're suddenly not giving them the ick. So when you're showing up consistent, loving, open, emotionally available, they are going to feel that anxiety, and in their mind, because they're not looking within, they're going to think that it's you giving them the ick. Okay, let's get into fearful avoidance next. Fearful avoidants have disorganized attachment. They have a dismissive avoidant attachment style, but they also have an anxious preoccupied attachment style. They have both insecure attachment styles. And this is because in addition to that emotional neglect, they often grew up in households that were chaotic, sometimes even abusive or traumatic. So they developed an anxious attachment style as well. And now they're used to that volatility. They're used to that chaos. They're used to operating at a high level of anxiety. It feels normal to them. And there is a comfort in familiarity. So when they get into a relationship with a toxic partner, maybe a narcissistic person, or someone along those lines, their nervous system is going to recognize that. Their subconscious is going to recognize that this person is emotionally unsafe. And it'll give them anxiety. But the fearful avoidant will confuse that anxiety for butterflies, for a spark. But when a healthy, emotionally available partner shows up, Their subconscious recognizes that this person is safe, which means that anxiety isn't there. But due to a lack of self-awareness, a lack of self-reflection, the fearful avoidant thinks that there's no spark because the anxiety is not there. They will mistakenly think that this person is boring and there's no chemistry. So when you're showing up and you're being consistent and you're showing that you're safe and emotionally available for them, well, it's going to feel safe, which means it's going to feel boring to them and they're going to get the ick. You showing up in a consistent, loving way will turn them off because they're used to that turmoil. They're used to that anxiety. They're used to toxicity because toxicity feels exciting to the fearful avoidant. When you become more emotionally unavailable, when you have walls up, and if you're inconsistent, it'll trigger their anxious side. They'll think that is a spark and they're very likely to chase you. But when you are consistent, available, and healthy, well, that anxious side is not being triggered. They will think it's boring. And then, well, it might get the ick. Now, in many cases, the ick can develop further down the road, or it could just mean that they become hypervigilant, looking for any inconsistencies in you to justify their urges to leave. But you being healthy can actually confuse them into thinking that there's no chemistry between you, and it can give them the ick. So if you showed up, regardless of whether your partner was a dismissive or fearful avoidant, and you showed up in a healthy way, you were behaving like a healthy, consistent, loving partner, and they suddenly lost attraction and lost feelings and decided that there was no spark, it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. It doesn't mean that you did anything wrong. It doesn't mean that you're not a good partner. It means that this person has attachment wounds and insecurities that stem back to childhood that they don't have awareness of, that they haven't self-reflected on, and they haven't worked on. And they're projecting that onto you in a very unhealthy way. It means that right now, at this point, they don't have the capacity to be that healthy, consistent partner that you want. It's unfortunate because you see that potential, but until they heal and work on themselves, it is only that potential. If you want that close, safe, reliable, emotionally intimate relationship that lasts, and this is a person that pushes you away because of those reasons, you're never going to get that with them, not until they work on themselves. And you can't force them to work on themselves. All the love in the world will not force them to change. They have to want it. So don't beat yourself up. You didn't cause this if you showed up in a good way.